right, should we get started? You think we should get going? All right, hello, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm Rachel Myers, and I'm the director of the Washington Low-Income Housing Alliance. Oh, and I wanted to refer back to, hold on one second. How many people are familiar with the Washington Low-Income Housing Alliance? Are any of it, most of you, maybe not everybody, some of you are members maybe? Do you get our email alerts? How many people have been to our Housing and Homelessness Advocacy Day in Olympia? Good. Well, let me just get a little context. The Housing Alliance, for those who don't know, the Housing Alliance is a statewide advocacy organization. And we every year develop a public policy agenda that we bring to the state legislature that we work to pass, and it's intended to improve rights and protections for people who are low income, for tenants, for manufactured homeowners, for low-income homeowners who are struggling. We advocate for funding for things like the State Housing Trust Fund and other sources of funding that help us end homelessness. And so we create our legislative agenda every year by listening to people all over the state, really starting with people who are directly impacted by the affordable housing and homelessness crisis. So I was really moved. Were most of you all just at the lunch session? And did you hear the speakers there? Did you all? I really just wanted to highlight, let me see if I can find it real quick. I just had to run, so I didn't load this up. But that last quote that the speaker put up on the screen that was from the book, it was from a woman named Jennifer, and talking about being invited to join tables and come and sit at our table to talk about, oftentimes we ask people who have experienced homelessness or who need affordable housing to come sit at a policy table to give information about, what would really help you. And what Jennifer had to say about things like that was, with all due respect, what I'm hearing from everyone is that people are offering seats at the table when it's not their table. Please don't get into the savior complex mode and invite me to sit at your table. In fact, it's my table and I'm not asking for a seat. It was already and is always my seat. I'm the one who experienced all this trauma and turmoil. I know what the problems are and what I need I built it. There would be no table without me, and I invite you to come sit at my table and let's have a conversation. And I thought that was a nice way to start this. The Resident Action Project is really trying to do just that. And I will say, as a sort of sponsor and organization that created and is hosting the Resident Action Project, we haven't figured it all out yet. We're learning, but we know as the Housing Alliance that the folks who are deeply impacted and are personally impacted by the affordable housing challenges and by homelessness in Washington State absolutely have to be leaders in the movement. They have to be the ones whose voices are setting the table. They need to be not just at the table, but it needs to be their table in telling us how we can solve this crisis. So the Resident Action Project is doing just that. And folks who are here on our panel today are all part of the Resident Action Project. So I'm going to do quick introductions, and then I am way more interested, and I know you are too, in hearing from our panelists and from me. But some quick introductions here. I want to start down at the far end. We've got Chris Harbert, sorry, I was looking for your organization, who's with Family Promise. Then we've got Quentin Baker, who's with Forge. We've got Michelle Pappas with FutureWise, and we've got Dua Rahima Hunter, who is with the Washington Low-Income Housing Alliance. And these are all Spokane-based folks, right? You're all in Spokane, I'm not wrong about that. And working to change policy both at the state level and at the local level here in Spokane. So I'm going to invite, I didn't say much in introductions because I want to let them all introduce themselves. I want to ask one more thing real quick about who is in the room. Can I get a sense of how many people are work for a nonprofit organization that provides housing to low-income folks? How many of you are like property managers? Any resident services folks? Any government staff? What else? Any public housing authority? A lot of housing authorities. Spokane Housing Authority? What other housing authorities do we have? Tacoma, Seattle, awesome. Okay, good. Thank you for that, Durahima. Awesome. So if we have a little bit of time at the end, then I think we might want to have a few more minutes. If we have time, we'll have a few minutes to talk about like what are you all doing in your organizations and in your work, and why are you doing that? How are you engaging residents and tenants and the folks that you serve in creating policies in your organization or setting direction for your organization? Because I think we can learn from each other. We're kind of a small enough group that we might be able to just have a good conversation about that. Okay, let me start off here. I have lost already my first question. Okay, so first question is, we want to ask, do a Rahima actually. So as a statewide organizer for the Resident Action Project, which is also called RAP, so I'll be calling it RAP sometimes during this session today, can you start off by telling us about RAP? What are RAP's goals, and why do we organize with people who have experienced housing instability?
Okay, so RAP, Resident Action Project RAP, is a statewide network of folks with lived experience of housing injustice, instability, formerly homeless, and we use our voices to make change. So what RAP is doing is building leaders in communities across the state to advocate, organize, and storytell to make changes both on the state and local level. And what we are trying to do is take Spokane's chapter and make it a model for across the state. So we can have a strong chapter here so the voices here in Eastern Washington can just be as loud as everywhere else, and making sure that folks in the community across the state are able to build in their communities.
That's great.
Oh, and what was the other question?
Nope. Why do we organize with people who have experienced housing instability?
Because if you're like me, a person with lived experience, what is the quote? Those closest to the problem are closest to solution, but always furthest away from the table. And we bring our own table, to the place because we need to be seen and we need to be heard. And we have experience. I say I have a PhD from the streets. But I also have a degree, a BAS, but I have a PhD from the streets. So I have knowledge. So I have street knowledge and both book knowledge because as a Black woman, I've been impacted by all systems. And so I want to bring those who don't think their voices are loud enough or matter to let them know it does matter and to teach them how to use their voice.
Yeah, and is it okay if I add something to that too, from that Housing Alliance perspective? This is a kind of a housing industry conference, right? And it feels like an industry event. It doesn't feel always like a movement. And the industry, we haven't solved it yet, have we? Have we solved the housing crisis? Have we solved homelessness? We need a lot more people to be engaged in this. We need a movement. We need a powerful movement. And we can't build a movement just with the housing industry. So if we're actually going to solve this, we got to have the folks that are directly impacted and who are closer to the problem involved in the solutions and building what is an actual movement that can have the political power and the public power to make changes. All right, so we're going to go down, and why don't we start with Michelle, and then we'll work down that way. So my question to each of you is, you are all members of RAP, and you also all work for housing justice in your professional lives. Can you take just a couple minutes to introduce yourselves and share a little bit about how you're working to ensure that everyone here in Spokane and across the state can live in a safe, healthy, affordable home?
Well, hello, everyone. Again, my name is Michelle Pappas. I work for a land use nonprofit here in Washington State called FutureWise. I am the Spokane program manager as well as a RAP member for the last 2.5 years. I am a community organizer around housing, but especially focusing on ensuring that communities have the ability to band together and pass policy that impacts those who are closest to the housing crisis. So I founded and work on a housing coalition, but all of this is grounded in the fact that I am a disability rights activist as well as Latina and Indigenous. And I come with that community in mind, but I've also experienced homelessness both as a teenager and as a parent, both times due to domestic violence. It is incredibly common, my story, and one of the beautiful things that I do find in sharing my story is how many others have experienced the same thing and the healing that can come from building out that community. I am a RAP member because it gives the people power to change lives. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Michelle. Quentin?
There we go. Hi, my name is Quentin Baker, born and raised in Spokane, Washington. I'm the founder and executive director of a local nonprofit called Forge. There we develop direct service programs aimed to reduce barriers to health, housing, and reentry. I would say we work to make sure that everyone can have a safe, healthy, affordable home by, one way we do it is through our housing advocacy program, and that's twofold. So we provide housing stability services. Specifically, if individuals are at risk of eviction, we do have some housing funding assistance available. We do light case management as well. So if there's any type of issues between landlords and tenants, we kind of step in and try to mitigate those issues, prevent any type of also provide mutual terminations of leases, so we negotiate those for clients as well. While they're in that program, if they've got any type of barrier that's criminal history based, we do have a partnership with a local nonprofit law firm here called The Way to Justice, and we provide funding assistance for individuals to receive those services, and they walk them through the court process to vacate any eligible charges off of their criminal record. I would say another way is we actively advocate for legislation on the west side that supports housing stability. The last thing that we did was for rent stabilization when we went over for the lobby day, working with legislators, communicating with them, letting them know that people on the east side are experiencing some significant issues, and making sure that we have a voice and seat at the table is something that we also do.
Thanks, Quentin. Chris, same question.
Thank you. With RAP, I'm here to convince everyone that there is no housing crisis. It's a crisis of ideology. There are enough houses, there is enough money. The fact that we're still having these conversations is kind of wild to me. This is a solvable, achievable, it's a finite problem, right? We can do this. And so with RAP, I do a lot of advocacy working to affect policy on a state level. How many of you know all of the complicated things that go along with what your definition of homelessness is, right? Whether or not you receive funding, whether or not you receive support. Things like rent stabilization, all of these on a local level as well. What are the policies? Whether or not a city chooses to give reimbursable grants with payments up front to a small nonprofit matters so much. How is that small nonprofit, how is that buy in for org going to float all of that money until maybe they get paid? You can't do it, right? There's so much work to be done. At Family Promise of Spokane, we provide wraparound services. If you are a family, by the loosest definition of the word, and you are unstable or need new housing, we help you get and keep housing. My role there is mostly program development and research. Why research? What are we looking at? What is the definition? How many people are we talking about? We can design a program that will end all family homelessness in Spokane County. We just need to know how many people we need to do it for. We need to answer those questions about what causes homelessness, and I don't want to hear, get a job. I don't want to hear, you made bad choices, right? Across all of our research over the last 5 years, the #1 indicator of housing stability is whether or not somebody has their Social Security card. I can't tell you why. I can give you a lot of theories, but nobody would ever guess that, right? If all we're doing is listening to people and saying, well, yeah, obviously, if you get a job, you can buy a house. Right now in Spokane, in order to be able to afford a 2-bedroom, you need to be making $25 an hour. That is not a starting wage. That is not an entry-level wage. So my role is to support and build all of the programs, came from direct service work, to allow our organization to do just that.
Thanks, Chris. Why don't we come back this way? Quentin, you want to? Oh, no, we're on to the next question. Sorry about that. So this is an everybody question, too. So you all have your own experience with housing instability, and I do as well, and I know that it shapes my work. It gives me a sense of urgency that I think I might not feel otherwise. When I'm making decisions, I think about, like, what would past me, what would my mom, when she was a single mom and barely keeping a roof over her heads, what would she have thought about that? It impacts everything that I do. And I'm sure that it does for you all as well. So I want to invite you all to take just a couple of minutes to talk about how your lived experience shapes your work today. And specifically, is there anything that you feel like you bring to your organizing or to your work that comes from that lived experience? And do we want to, Chris, would you mind starting, and then we'll come down this way?
Thank you. Yeah, I have been behind on rent and threatened with evictions more times than I can count. Thank you, neuroplasticity. I have been homeless more than once, sometimes for extended periods. Yesterday, I was coming out of a small local market here, and there was somebody sitting on the curb eating, and another person approached them and said, "Hey, do you know where there's a spigot around here that I could fill my water bottle? I'm really thirsty and I need to fill." And whether or not you as a person believe that housing is a human right, I think that we can all agree that access to water, access to safe water is a human right. I think we can all agree that all of these other things that in our society here are tied to that housing. That housing is not just a roof. That housing is not just a place to put your things that's safe. That housing is not just safety at night. It is access to all of the other rights that most people wouldn't argue with. And so that perspective, I used to know in the neighborhoods where I was, in the areas where I was, where I could, where that church might leave their spigot on, where I could get water that was safe to drink or use for other things. And that's that perspective that I bring of, yeah, it's a much bigger picture, and it's not just about housing being a human right, it's the fact that we've chosen to tie all of the other rights to that place.
Thank you.
So full disclosure, I'm 42 years old. I've been on my own since 17. And so I can tell you that I've spent a lot of cold nights outside. I can tell you what it's like to sleep on trampolines, tell you what it's like to sleep in abandoned buildings. I can tell you what it's like to sleep in a car next to a park. These were all some of my experiences and part of my journey to get to where I am today. So looking back, I'm proud that I went through that because it taught me that I don't want anybody else to ever experience something like that in their life. Everybody should have access to resources, everybody should have access to information, and everybody should have access to stable housing. And so today I work as hard as I possibly can to make sure that nobody else comes up or has to see a day like that.
Thanks, Quentin.
When I first read this question, the first thought I had was, for what do I bring from my past to my organizing? And my first thought was trauma. A lot of it. I go to therapy, I take my meds. As little as 6 years ago, my son and I were experiencing homelessness after we left a bad situation. And prior to that, I was actually raised in a cult. I don't know if any of you know who the Duggar family is, but that cult is what I was raised in. You know, no cutting your hair, no having an opinion as a woman. And so what I want to say that in all of this, in my experience leaving the church at 17, my experience living out of my car and couch hopping with my son, is that shame is a really powerful motivator, and the opposition knows it. And when we let shame dictate how our relationships flow between each other, we are so afraid of continuing that shame cycle that we keep it to ourselves. We stop having community because we're so afraid, what if somebody knows the things about me that I'm not supposed to have in my head? I also come to this, I'm disabled, I'm bipolar. I talk a lot about disability, and growing up and being told that the intrusive thoughts in your mind are of the voice of God was a lot of trauma that I had to work through. And I had to let go of that shame. And it is our responsibility as the storytellers and the providers and the activists that we let people know that there is no shame in being homeless. There is no shame in doing what is best for your family with the resources that you have. One of the things I'm really focused on right now, I'm hyper-focused, is trauma-informed storytelling. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, but how we approach people and build out those relationships is going to make such a difference in the sustainability of the project that you're working on.
Thanks, Michelle.
So growing up, I remember my mom was a single mom, so we were, doubled up. We moved a lot and things like that. And as an adult, I became my mom, with my kids. I faced instability and injustice because of the color of my skin. My credit score wasn't high enough. I had a voucher, what was on my criminal background, and then fast forward to as an adult, you know, like 3 years ago, one of my loved ones who was coming out of the penitentiary, my ex-husband, he couldn't stay. He was denied living with me because he was coming out of the prison system, but we had to appeal that, you know, and so I have loved ones that are still in there, and so I have to think about not just my loved ones, but how are we supposed to keep people out if they cannot even get a place to stay, you know? So I'd say I started off as, before I got into this position, I was a case manager, so I worked with eviction, provision, the veterans, transitional housing, supportive services. But I got my organizing skills from the Black Prisoners Caucus, if anybody knows who they are. Okay, and if you don't, they're a group that started in the 70s in the prisons. So organizing around, you know, with DLC, the Department of Correction, I feel like if you can organize with them, you can organize with anybody. So, but I do have to say I stand on the shoulders of the Black Prisoners Caucus, who encouraged me to use my voice to make a change, especially when I came over here in Spokane. So I do what I do and got involved. And because when I went into the room, I didn't see me. I just seen people talking about what was happening in my community. But I wasn't present on that, talking about what was happening, or nobody in there that looked like me in there. And so I had to say, I can tell my own story, and I'm best at telling my story. So if I have to look out for my community and be somewhere, and it's like, I'd rather be me than somebody else that's not in my community.
Thank you, dear Rahima. The next question is for Chris. So Chris, you work with Family Promise here in Spokane, like you said earlier. And in that work, you're connected with families who are struggling to afford housing, and also with a lot of coworkers who provide services to those families. Part of the vision for RAP is that people who provide housing, provide affordable housing or services, have a really important role to play in helping their tenants or their clients use their voices to advocate to improve public policy for themselves and their families and neighbors and everyone. Can you share any examples where you've seen that happen and give us any thoughts on how that works?
Absolutely, thank you. In our organizations, we are taught that there's not enough money, that there's not enough time, that there's not enough resources. Organizations like RAP allow us to realize that there is, that we can take that abundance mindset. What if, when somebody asked for help, we just said yes? What if when we asked them what they need and they told us, we just said yes? I have good days, I have bad days. On my good days, I'm really, really good. On my bad days, I can't fill out 30 pages of paperwork in order to fill out, assistance for housing, right? It's taken me years to figure out how to get to the point where I don't have to do that anymore. When somebody comes to me on a bad day, when somebody comes to my organization and the people that work there on a bad day, our job is not to say, this is going to be your program. These are your qualifications. This is who you are. This is your definition of homelessness. This is the amount of money that's available to you, and you need to make it happen. Our job, what if we just said yes? There are times when our folks need help talking to a landlord because they were sexually abused by their prior landlord and they are scared. What if we just said, yes, we will help with that conversation? There are times when our folks are ashamed. I've been ashamed to ask for money every time I've done it in my life. They don't want to have to ask for help. What if we just said, we are going to help you and you don't have to ask? Organizing and sharing these experiences. I would not be on this stage today if it weren't for these people right here next to me, because organizing like this, getting to know these folks, I found Michelle was one of my first friends in Spokane that I met. Rahima was one of my first friends here in Spokane. Quentin was one of my first friends in Spokane here that I met. Because moving here from Portland, not necessarily the most easy, right? And so it provides that community. And what do we do in community? When somebody in our community, when somebody in our circle says, I need some help with this today, what do? We say yes. And that is the role that our organizations can play. And I would challenge all of you that are in these organizations, and somebody's going to ask, well, they're going to say, well, why don't you just give a house? And my answer is, yeah, I would. Why not? They're out there. What if we just said yes? What is it that you are afraid of? And usually the answer is, whoever's asking that question, they're afraid that somehow they're not going to have enough. And I say, then why would you support the system that makes you so afraid of that?
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Michelle, you talked before about, I think you said you were hyper-focused on trauma-informed storytelling. In your role with RAP, you facilitated trainings to help people learn and feel comfortable telling their own stories, to advocate for better policy. Can you start off telling us, from your perspective, how do personal stories help create change? And then how can we support people in sharing their own experience in a way that's empowering and trauma-informed and not tokenizing?
They gave me 2 minutes, y'all. I'm gonna do my best to respond.
You can take 3.
This is a great question. I'm really excited. Stories are how we change the hearts and minds and connect people to move policy. It gives the issue a face. Data is great, but unless you've convinced the heart, there's not going to be the passion and the motivation behind it. So I mentioned trauma-informed therapy before. Trauma-informed therapy, trauma-informed storytelling. A lot of this, especially as the organizer, I have found it is my responsibility, not the responsibility of the person of whom I'm asking something, but it is my responsibility to build the relationship with that person so that I can directly ask, what do you need in order to be successful here? And within professional bounds, there is a lot that we can do. I think of one specific instance where we were testifying at City Council. I needed a buddy. I have PTSD from my time experiencing homelessness and my time in the cult. I needed somebody, just one person, that I showed up with and I left with because it made me less horrified. And I don't know if this is happening in your cities. If y'all are in Seattle, it is happening. It's not always safe for us to tell our stories. I literally get followed to the bathroom by officers whenever I go testify at City Council. It is not always safe for our community to come out. So it is your responsibility as the organizer to find out how safe you can make that situation. That's how we come to it with trauma information. That's how we come to it and recognize the person as a whole. Tokenizing. Oh gosh, this is a long answer. My big question, I guess, for you all is, what are you doing with the communities that you want to connect with, that you want to pass policy with? What are you doing for them when you do not have an ask? How are you showing up in their community? How are you showing up and providing allyship and ensuring that you are supporting in the way that community needs? Because until you build an authentic and vulnerable relationship, and that's going to be really hard for some people because we come at this with this sense of professionalism that I can't tell you what's really going on in my heart and my mind, and you will lose people if you don't access that. So absolutely the way that we tokenize people is building these authentic and real relationships and ensuring that people are supported in the way that they need to be successful and be sustainable.
Thank you. That was a lot in a very short amount of time. Well done. Quentin, as a RAP member, you have attended a movement building training for organizers from RAP and from similar organizations in a couple of other states to build a peer network and hone organizing skills together. Can you tell us about that, and especially how being a part of a network of organizers with lived experience can help support your work locally?
Certainly. First of all, if none of you have been to New Orleans, I would encourage you all to go. It's a wonderful time. Much to see and do there. My experience at that particular conference was amazing. It kind of brought me out of my shell when it comes to building through community, organizing in the community, and specifically door knocking. So that was something that I was completely unfamiliar with and uncomfortable with at that particular time. Just learning how different organizations kind of navigated that process and walking through it with them. When I tell you they took us to the hood in New Orleans to do door knocking, I promise you that's where we went. But it was an eye-opening experience because what we were out there advocating for, the people really resonated with. And when I actually saw that and saw that I was connecting with people that I was not necessarily my neighbors on issues that were relative to them, it ignited a fire in me. I'm like, oh, I know people where I live kind of go through these same things and have these same experiences. We're just in different locations. And so that made me want to come back and do for my people and my communities as I was down there doing for those communities. And the Milwaukee experience was also awesome. I had cheese curds for the first time, which is pretty good. I was surprised with that. But I really enjoyed that experience because I learned more about the term community power and building, like I said, through community and how to organize a community to create a collective voice that's strong enough that it can actually penetrate the walls of legislation. And how do we create a seat for us at that table? Because as it was already previously mentioned, they don't offer these opportunities and seats. You pretty much have to barge through the door and make yourself heard. And so I say, learning that in those two locations and then coming back and working with RAP here locally, it's strengthened my confidence in going out and engaging with my community, as well as giving me new perspective on how other organizations in different areas tackle the same issues and bringing some of that same knowledge back to my community.
That's great, thank you. And we're a couple minutes ahead of time, so I wanted to ask does anybody else want to add something to that, either about the movement building training or about like how valuable it is to have a network of other organizers to connect with?
So with RAP, there's an organization in Oregon called Residents Organizing Network, one in California, Residents United Network. ROC is Oregon, Residents Organizing Change. In California, Residents Organizing Network. And in New Orleans, Residents, what was it?
It's
and
ROLA, Residents Organizing in
ROLA.
Louisiana, something like that.
Residents Organized in Louisiana. And so just having a network of folks, and plus we had other partners like Detroit's people in Detroit, down in South Carolina, in Colorado, in New Mexico. So all these different organizers around housing and some other issues all get together and seeing how different people organize, how their legislative systems work, what they're organizing on, how they organize, how they do one-to-one. So we do a lot of peer-to-peer training. So we don't get the professionals because we are the professionals, and we do a lot of peer-to-peer training. So RAP members, if they have a skill and if they kind of let me know, I love them and encourage them to, that's what they would tell you.
The term she uses is voluntold.
Softens it by using it fall in love.
It's fall in love, right? So because they have a skill, and it's just really just sharpening your skills. It's like on-the-job training, right? Because it doesn't just help to build the movement, it helps them to build whatever they got going on in their own lives to use their voice.
Thank you. Anybody else, Michelle or Chris, have anything you want to add?
There's some real beauty to finding your community and finding your people. And I didn't realize in this work how much I crave that. I should preface, I am in an office of one here in Eastern Washington. So loneliness can creep in when it's just me in my home office. But this group has been so wonderful. And without this woman's support and her fall in love, I would not be where I am today. I have no formal background in housing. I studied opera and jazz in college, which has made me no money. So I come from this purely from that lived experience. I come from this purely as loving my community and desperately wanting to build that community, because when we build that community, we build each other's power up, and we are so much more effective together.
Thank you. So every year, the Housing Alliance and RAP organizes an advocacy day in Olympia where people come from all over the state to talk to their lawmakers and make a lot of noise on the Capitol campus for all of our shared housing justice priorities. This year, we will be doing that on March 14th, so mark your calendar.
Friday.
It's a Friday.
Three-day weekend.
Yep. And I know many of you have been to HAD. I saw some hands when I asked that question, and all of these folks up here have attended HAD, which is what we call Housing and Homelessness Advocacy Day, in the past. So I'm just going to invite each of you to say a couple words about, or a few words about, for anyone who might be considering attending, and especially attending and supporting residents or tenants or clients or folks you work with in coming. Can you tell us about your experience there and offer any encouragement for why people should do that? And I will let whoever's ready to start go ahead and start.
Sure, I can go first. I've actually never attended HAD in person. Last year, 2 days before we were supposed to be in Olympia, I didn't even do anything cool, y'all. I tripped on the sidewalk and I sprained my ankle and I was in a boot. And Olympia is just known for its accessibility. So I was unable to go this year, and I felt the loss of that deeply. But I have got to go in past years on Zoom, and I live in the 6th legislative district, and if any of you know, that's a very conservative district. It can, and sometimes, like when you're dealing with people that you know are opposed to what you're working on, it can feel like you're just kind of chipping away. But you are chipping away. You are starting to get the wheels turning, to move in that direction, to educate the community. But I think the thing that stands out to me most about those days is the community that we built by going out and doing that together, by going out and actually speaking with these legislators, by explaining our stories and our backgrounds. We were able to get to know each other and build out that community.
Thank you.
Last year was my first year, and it was awesome. I really enjoyed that entire experience. It was my first time really getting in the room with legislators, and I realized that they don't make these decisions in vacuums. They actually listen to their constituents to a degree, I'll say, and come up with some policy. And so I actually also witnessed some of the legislative process when policies hit the floor. And this is where the testimony comes in, because they often reference conversations that they have with their constituents and bring that to the floor. So not only does your story have life right there in that moment, but now the entire House of Representatives or the entire Senate is hearing your story, and it's resonating, and it's in some situations changing the opinions and stances of some of these legislators. So it's very important, and I realize how important that is, and that's why I kind of want to continue to be in that space for sure.
Thank you.
There is nobody that knows more about water than a fish. It's not the marine biologist, it's not the oceanographer.
Nope.
There is nobody that knows more about homelessness than somebody who's experienced it, right? I don't have a degree, I'm a 2-time college dropout, but I have experienced it. Those in power are afraid of change. We know this. Belonging only exists when supported by power. It is hard to go and speak to power, even as somebody that has visible privilege. But if I'm going to talk the talk, I probably should walk the walk. And when I did, I discovered something interesting. Because I went in and I sat down in Ormsby's office, and I said, I live and I work in the 2nd District, and I work in a homeless shelter. And he said, you work at Family Promise. There are allies there, and they need our help. How many of you have heard the phrase that renters, tenants don't vote? That is not true. I've missed a lot of rent payments. I've never missed an election. And there were 700 of us there with one voice saying, you have our support. We need change. We will help you. You have to do it because there are enough of us and we vote.
Yeah, thank you. Rahima?
Okay, so for me, when I first went, that's when I was born and raised in Seattle, y'all. I've been over in Spokane for 8 years. So when I went over there for the first time, I wasn't working with the Alliance. I went in there as a community member and working for where I worked for Kent, the city of Kent, right? And so it was different when I went to go see my legislator. It was way different. But it was like when I went for the first time, to just be in space with so many people was just amazing. And then when I started working with the Alliance was during COVID, and the last 2 years it was on Zoom. But when we organized for the one that happened in January in 2020 this year, it was amazing because we didn't get 700 people there, but we did 700 people registered, like 500 came, in busloads. There was one county that this whole theater was all from there, would be filled with the people they brought up in buses over there. So it's really important to come out in community to see how many people are out there and just one voice and seeing, learning and just connecting with folks and being in community with other people wanting the same thing you want for your community and beyond. It's just amazing. So if you guys want to be involved, put the date on March 14th, Friday. We have like flyers outside at a table there so you can get connected for actions and find out when our alerts are coming in and things when it's time for for our HAD.
Awesome, thank you.
Just go on how people can get involved.
Yeah, go ahead to that next question.
And if you want to know about rap, what am I going to say, Chris?
You're going to say come have dinner.
Yeah, because I'm always ready. I just think like relationships are built over food. Yeah. And we can get together. I can come to you. We can do a Zoom call. We'll eat lunch over boxes for those who are far away from me. But if you're in the area that I'm close to or I can get to, I will come see you, and we can have a power hour and talk about. We'll rap about rap, right, over some good food. But it's also, I have flyers out there. There's like postcards, and there's 4 different, you really should get the postcards because there's 4 different ways to get involved with the Alliance as a whole. We have our roadmap to house and justice to see where we're going in the future. And if y'all want to join that ride, you're welcome that journey. We have legislative leads, which we're always looking for leads, and that's for your legislative district. There's 49 districts, so we take about 2 leads, and the lead is responsible for organizing their community to take action. And then we have RAP and then ways to take action. So if you want to, we want you to connect with your elected officials. You don't even have to write anything. It's already pre-written. Ain't that nice? Because sometimes we get stuck like, what do I write? It's already written. All you got to do is put your name on there and your address so it can go to the right person.
Thank you, dear Rahima. Yeah, why don't you keep that? And we've still got 5 minutes left. And that's the end of our formal questions. So let's see, does anybody in the audience have questions? Anybody have questions for any of these organizers?
Any concerns, any comments?
Well, if we don't have questions, oh, go ahead. We're bringing you a mic.
Is it working now?
There you go.
Awesome. My name is Tim. I am new with the Department of Commerce. I'm a big fan of the Low Income Housing Alliance and have volunteered and received and sent forward emails on behalf of folks and love the RAP project. Basically, I am wondering if you have any advice about how to infuse the spirit of resident advocacy in the public sector, where advocacy is not tolerated in a lot of ways or allowed, essentially. I'm curious if any of you have advice.
Pass that down.
Your time is yours, right? I work at Family Promise. I am not here as a representative of Family Promise. I am here because I want to talk to all of you and tell you that it is possible. Yeah, you have to be careful. But you know what? There's a lot about me that my job does not know. And it should stay that way. You are allowed, as your own person, to advocate for your community. You are allowed. You cannot speak for the Department of Commerce. You can't speak for the state. You can't speak for your workplace proximity associates, but you can speak your experience, you can share your truth, and you can share that to the community around you, and nobody can take that away.
Real quick, just master the art of the water cooler conversation as well.
So RAP is both a C3 and a C4, so we can do, and everybody can do C3. Like Chris said, you're not your job. Your job does not own you. You know, you work from 1 hour to another hour. But if you don't have that work-life balance, then maybe you are still working for them once you get home. You're gonna have to work on that. But no, like Chris said, you are able to advocate as a community member, as somebody who's impacted, somebody who wants to see change, you know, beyond your community and stuff like that. So, but not on work time if you're on the clock. You can, if they do C3, C3 is nonpartisan, C4 is different. So, but you can do C4, and anybody in here, even if your organization is a C3, you can do whatever you want after work.
Well, and to your question, I think part of your question was about how do you get resident focused, resident voices engaged in the public sector, right? And so, you know, advocacy is a broad term. We talk about legislative advocacy, policy advocacy, changing public policy. You know, unless your governmental body is pushing for something as a part of its, you know, sort of its a formal agenda, then you probably can't do that. But advocacy can also be like supporting people in talking about what their needs are. Like the Department of Commerce or any local government housing department should be listening to people who are directly impacted by your funding sources or by the problems that you're trying to solve. So I think you can really push effectively, probably because I think there's an increasing recognition of the importance of like resident voices if you're talking about housing funding. And we've seen it in the Department of Commerce and like a lot of, you know, and the legislature passed the Nothing About Us Without Us bill last year. So the state can now pay people who are bringing their lived expertise the same way that many of you are probably getting paid, if not most of you are getting paid for being here. Oftentimes when we invite people who are, you know, benefiting from or the direct recipients of affordable housing, they're just expected to show up on their own time, right? So I think that this is starting to change in governmental bodies, including the Department of Commerce. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for you to bring like resident voices and push for resident voices to really lead within governments.
And with RAP, because we had started conversations with Commons with the House and Homeless Adult Unit back in 2021, and through we were meeting monthly with Commons. We would present to them, they would present to us, we would talk to them about different things that were going on in different programs. And so through them conversations that RAP had with Commerce, they have started their lived experience committee that they're actually doing applications, or they're getting ready to do the interviews on the applications, because we've been there from the beginning and we're going to stay there till the end to make sure that we're getting voices on that committee that's geographically and demographically represented across the state.
Other questions? Somebody down there had a mic? Thank you for running that.
Hi, so I work for the Seattle Housing Authority at the front desk, so I spend a lot of time talking to people who are not always so happy with the way that either Section 8 or low-income housing is operating, and they want to be able to advocate, and, you know, I do what I can to help them navigate and advocate for themselves within the system. First of all, I know you guys are all from Spokane, but to hear a little bit about what the Seattle area chapters are up to, and then also, like, I'm sure I'll grab a flyer and be able to give it to you about how those people can get involved in RAP.
I'll give you some postcards to take to the office. And then
something I could photocopy, maybe.
Huh?
Something I could photocopy, not using work printers. Oh, I said something I could photocopy, but all flyers I can hand out. We'll talk.
We can find you something to photocopy. Do you want to say more? No? About how folks can get involved specifically in Seattle and.
Yeah, we do do local calls. So we do like what I call regional calls. So we do have a King County call that are monthly on Zoom in the box. And we have an Eastern Central Washington call, which is the first Thursday of the month, which is hybrid. at the Carl Maxey Center and on Zoom. Then we also have a Southwest, which you know Clark County down the way. That's a meeting, and up north. So we have regional meetings once a month. So people are able to get involved. They can become a RAP member. Or they can just reach out to me. I'll give you my information, and they can come to a meeting and see how it is and things like that. Or they can just call and talk to me, because we'll be more than happy because for them to come and want to know how to organize and advocate on their behalf.
Yeah, and Rahima, do you want to say anything about the Put Tenants First effort? Because that's specifically around improving, about making sure that the federal government is listening to like public housing tenants and folks who are living in housing that's funded by the federal government.
So the Put Tenant First, which Michelle, you were part of that as well, it's a national coalition of folks in housing, and it started about 2 years ago when we did a town hall with Secretary Fudge, with one of her staff members. And then we had a town hall with Secretary Fudge, and in May of, was it last year? May last year, we went to, all of us, first they did a tour, so we were talking to a lot of their Secretary Fudge staff about the conditions across the country of some of their units, and having the rights for tenants to organize without what do you call it? Retaliation, thank you. Without retaliation. And so we went up to, and so it was the right to organize, the conditions of the building, and criminalizing homelessness, right? So we were in, we were up in DC, all of us, but before we went to DC, they did a tour. So Secretary HUD did a tour. They were in Ohio, down in North Carolina? Cottage Grove, Oregon, and there was one more. Oh, Louisiana, and then Ohio, looking at the conditions of the building and listening to tenants to find out what's going on in their buildings and stuff like that. So when we went up there, folks got to speak to, HUD and her cabinet about what was going on around criminalization of homelessness, which was crazy because we're in there talking about it while we were at the park. We watched this guy have an episode, and we watched the police kind of tackle him. And so that was something we were able to talk to her about when we went to go see her. But the right for tenants to organize passed, and I believe there was some funding that went with it, but we're still working on other things that need to change. So we still have that coalition that is going on now with folks from across the nation.
Thank you. Other questions? Does anybody know? Let me look over here. Does anybody, oh, I see a question back there. I'll repeat it since not everybody may have heard it. For all of you, how long have you been with your organizations, and what's been the progression? Have you seen changes in the time that you've been with the organization?
Well, I've been with the Alliance for like 3.5 years. And since COVID, I started in COVID, so it was different. But now that COVID's no longer here, it's easier to connect with folks in the community. So I see more people getting involved. And it could be also with the Alliance as a whole, more folks around the nation, the state getting more involved around rent stabilization.
I have been with FutureWise for exactly 3 years this weekend. I have been with RAP for about 2.5 years. One of our biggest successes has been maybe if some of you were in here earlier before lunch, they were talking about the missing middle legislation that Washington State passed. And so we worked on that legislation statewide and locally through that relationship building. And then we actually had additionally worked on that at the city level. The city of Spokane passed some missing middle legislation in the then the state followed. So that's work that we are really proud to have been a part of. And really the other part is building coalitions. I mean, I am here for coalitions. I love it. I want people to come together and have honest and authentic conversation about the needs of the community and how we can move forward. I never want to be a program or a facilitator of something that we just go in circles and circles. There needs to be some forward momentum. And the other thing that I've seen is just how our community has come together. My boss the other day asked if I could get childcare for some event, and I was like, no, all my friends are gonna be at the meeting I'm going to. And that has been really beautiful. It's just building out that community. We take a good 5 minutes at the end of meetings. As a facilitator, I try to take 5 minutes and talk about the other work you're doing. So it's like the end icebreaker. At the beginning, we talk about ourselves. At the end, we talk about our organization. And we're able to build that relationship through that.
So I founded Forge about 3 years ago now, and I can't exactly tell you when my start date was. I was one of those people that were voluntold to get involved. I was just having casual conversation with Dwa Rahima one day, and I blink and I'm getting some trainings and part of team calls and all that fun stuff. But I will say that I've seen in my time since I've been involved a groundswell of frustrated tenants as monthly rent has been increasing. It's steadily been increasing, and people are becoming more and more frustrated. That's in the complex where I live as well as the community that I live in. What I'm hoping to do is to try to connect those individuals to organizations like this so they can be heard. Their frustrations can have a positive outlet that can actually lead to systems change.
I got vol and loved into rap about 2.5 years ago. It's been a lot of fun. I've been with Family Promise for about 3.5 years now. And 3.5 years ago, we decided that we were going to take responsibility for any family in Spokane County that was unstably housed or unhoused. There are other organizations here that are working with them. We decided that regardless of that, we were going to take responsibility. The first year that I was with Family Promise, we rehoused somewhere around 52 families. Last year, we rehoused 104. As of today, we rehoused our 138th family so far this year. We have gotten better. We have figured out how to do it faster. When I started there, our average time to find somebody a home was 120 days. Now, it is under 40. And we are now housing some of our families the same day they contact us. We don't own units. We are finding units in the community. We are finding people apartments and houses that they can rent faster than most people can move. We can do this because we committed to, and that's the change that I've seen, is that we as a provider and we as a community said we can use our experience to do this, and we are doing it.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say one more thing. So I know, like, we've been going to Olympia for rent stabilization. I do know that one of our local council members here kind of passed a, not rent stabilization in the city of Spokane, but a notice of rent increases, giving folks time to decide if they're going to stay or not, if they got a rent increase. So that was kind of huge because it came off the bills that we are working on.
Thank you. Well, we're right at time. It's 2:40, so thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you to our panelists. We really, really appreciate you all. And I'm going to assume that folks are going to be maybe around for a little bit if folks want to talk a little bit more, if folks want to find out or connect directly with Dua Rahima in particular about how to get your organization or your tenants connected with RAP, please just connect one-on-one and we can do that. Thank you.